This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Drinking with Authors. I get very excited. Okay. I am your host, Erica Lance. Co-hosting with me today is
Mark Muncie from Erie Travels in Erie, Florida.
Yay! And our guest today, incomparable. I actually have a little bit of a fangirl moment that I need to get under control here. So our guest is Bill Fawcett. Yay! Woo! Okay, let's talk about what we're drinking before I forget that, because I forgot it last time. So I'm so bougie. I went to Aldi and found this Winking Owl sweet red wine that's like $5 a bottle. I'm super, super bougie. But I am drinking it out of my Drinking with Authors swag, which is sent to all of our guests. Mark, what are you drinking tonight?
I am trying to stay up, so I have some Coffee Shop of Horrors La Petite Morte, which is their vanilla, their French vanilla. And then I've added a little something to it just to make sure today goes well. And it's, okay.
Jim Beam. I like it. Bill, you are drinking something fascinating. Do share with us.
What I'm drinking is Inca Cola, which I discovered an addiction to while staying in Peru and Ecuador, where it's very popular. It's actually a Coca-Cola product, and you can find it occasionally in the US. I don't drink because I was a bartender. And after I put myself to grad school bartending, after several years of a Holiday Inn, I don't drink anymore because I saw too many drunk Shriners.
No, totally. So so excited. How do you get this then? Do you have never mind, this might be an illegal question. How do you acquire such things?
Well, you can buy it in certain Coke stores and import stores. In Atlanta, there's one called H Mart. Any store that does Hispanic goods generally will carry it because it's the most popular drink in northern South America.
Oh, wow. I'm going to have to check this out because it has how much caffeine?
And it's got a lot of caffeine. I mean, it will keep you traveling and going.
It sounds like a gamer's delight.
It's basically good tasting, less carbonated Mountain Dew, which I don't like. So this is my Mountain Dew.
Nice.
Wow. I'm gonna see. We were talking about Dragon Con seconds ago, and I'm gonna have to go get that when I go to Dragon Con because I don't mind staying up the entire time I'm there.
They have a store called H Mart. It's about 20 minutes from downtown. You can get it.
Nice.
Perfect. I will find it. Okay. So, Bill, for any of our listeners who were living under a rock, can you tell them a little bit about yourself?
I'm short.
Okay, good. That was a little bit about yourself.
If you'd like a little more.
Just a smidge.
Let's see.
Just a smidge.
Going back a ways, I've been a gamer and been involved in writing since the 70s. Got involved with D&D about third level down. I knew Gary and all the people. In fact, later I got to know them quite well. But we were working off mimeograph pages before the books came out. And
Wow.
you know the coincidence with Jody, of course, on that, right?
Yes, I do. She told me, which is funny. I wanted to march in her honor, but it wouldn't go anywhere because there's nobody to march against now. But I would have marched on that.
She typed up the D&D Player's Handbook and Monster Manual for Gary and corrected his grammar.
Yep.
Didn't change his ideas, I hope, but she corrected his grammar. I never realized how many of us read her words already. Anyhow, about the time she was doing that, of course, Jody Lynn Nye is my wife. She was Brian Bloom's girlfriend, so she was the boss's girlfriend. So I never spoke to her for 10 years after that period.
Oh, wow.
But literally. But around, I've started doing articles starting with Dragon Magazine 1 for TSR. And, you always had these centerfolds with a little game thing in it or something like that, or I did the first Fantasy Chosen Path Adventure in it and things. That was me every month for the first 45 issues. That was my job.
Oh, wow.
I'm writing a review column for miniatures. So, and I became a fervent D&D player, played with a group, and then enjoyed it a lot. And I stayed with them until 1980 when I couldn't stay writing for them anymore because I became one of the founders of Mayfair Games.
Oh, wow.
About 6 months after they were founded, I was brought in. And I ran the Roll Age line for Mayfair. I designed most of their board games like Empire Builder and some of the others. And we got a few awards for them. And I did that for several years. And while I was doing that, I had gotten into writing primarily left-handedly because I was working with Berkeley because I did sales. And Berkeley was so I got to know everybody at ACE. And if you ask me later, I'll tell you how I got started writing, but I was tricked into it. And it was never a conscious decision. And eventually, while I was doing that, they asked me if I could help them put together some fantasy series and some Chosen Path series because I knew all about it and that. So I ended up as a book packager. So that by the late 80s, I was making more money working with the publishing industry. Now, I'm sorry for the monologue on this, by the way.
Good.
No, don't. Do not apologize.
In publishing, if they had enough editors, they didn't need packagers. What I basically did was came up with an idea, recruited the writers, sold it to the publisher, got the books in from the writers, edited the contents, turned them into the publisher for copy editing. Okay.
Yeah.
And contracted to do them, and they'd want a series on this topic or this topic, and I would create it for them. So I spent 15 years, 20 years creating series topics based on what they told me to do, basically, or what they felt they needed, or what looked like a good idea that I could sell to them. And it gave me an opportunity to work with a lot of writers and do a little innovation. Back in the 80s, you had books by big name authors and books by unknown authors. And when I first started working with Jim Bain, who was willing to experiment when he first founded Bain Books, I came up with the idea of matching some unknown authors with a known author and putting books out and seeing if we couldn't get the sales that approached what the known author got by themselves and get twice as many, 3 times as many books from them. Well, I did the first series and I picked some new unknown authors to work with Anne McCaffrey. One was Jody Lynn Nye, which I didn't have any choice because we'd already gotten married back in 85. And then a couple of newbies around that we thought would work well with her, Mercedes Lackey, Elizabeth Moon, Steve Sterling.
Just a couple people, just some randos. That
you hired.
Yeah, obviously hurt their career badly. And,
terrible. This was a terrible idea. Did anybody ever tell you how horrible of an
Yeah, well, 5 years later, I couldn't sell something like that if I wanted to because there was too much happening. But I guess it's nice to start even a minor variant on the world. So I continued book packaging for the next 25 years until I promised myself I'd retire several years ago. So I probably only packaged 30 or 40 books since then, and started. I have a hard time retiring.
I don't think somebody should retire. I think somebody should play the game of life they want to play. I mean,
also during that period, I founded 2 different software companies, did a role play game for AOL, did a number of board games, a couple of apps recently, working on another one now or bringing one back, and generally kept into the software business mostly in the late 80s and 90s before it got so expensive you couldn't afford to be an independent company. Now you need $3 million just to start a game because of the immensely improved quality and graphics that you have, which I'm happy to have as a player. So I also did that for years and I still dabble a bit. I'm working on an app, as I said, and helping some people with some role play games or back to paper games on occasion.
Okay, I gotta ask a question now, since you talked role play, because we're both gaming nerds. I actually just started up another game with some authors, friends of mine, and stuff like that. But what is your favorite class to play in D&D?
What do I play?
Like, what do you like to play in D&D? What is your go-to, like, I'm going to play this?
Well, what I like to play generally is a paladin or an anti-paladin.
What? I was going to say a paladin?
Yeah.
But what I normally get stuck is the cleric who leads the party and heals them a lot and does a lot of chanting.
Yeah.
Because I'm willing to let other people take the chances while I think about how we should have handled that puzzle.
I love it.
I mean,
Oh,
whoever shoots the prime minister, you know, they get the king. So I'll stand behind the throne. What I don't play are fighters.
That's interesting. My favorite class is a rogue. By far is a rogue, and the other one I like is a druid.
I like druids. Help create druids, and a few things like that. It's, you know, gray hair, and they're fun. I just since I cut my teeth on the first books, I'm a classicist, and I by the time AD&D came in, had bad habits. So I play the original types.
Yeah.
I believe that. I tell people regularly that I started playing when it was a box. You played way before I did, but started playing with a box set. And we had to color the dice in with crayons so you could read the numbers. Yep. And it's funny for, you know, of course, seeing all the dice and things like that people have now. And Jody held up her vast jug of epic dice. You know,
we did a brand of dice. We made a lot of sales on it. I gave her 40 pounds of the overruns. That's just the remnants because we've moved so many times. One Halloween, I take all the dice you want out of a jar for every kid who came to our door. And that was in the 80s. It was very popular.
I bet.
For $1.50 each.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, if I knew that, I'd be like, hi, where's your house now?
Yeah. I just realized my Crown Royal bag full of dice is out in the car. I normally have it right with me, but we just came from a game yesterday.
But I do remember the dice, and I still have a permanent scar on my right foot from a four-sider.
The caltrip of dice, yes.
Yes, it got me. I said it's very ungaming-like things. So when I'm not doing all that fun stuff, I've been writing a series of books on the great mistakes in history. Editing others, including 100 Stumbles in the March of History, and books with titles like How to Lose a War and How to Lose a Battle and You Did What.
Fantastic.
Great. Look Good on Paper, which is engineering mistakes that change history. I've got this theory, if you don't mind my diverting.
No, it's
go for it.
Got this theory that most of what happens in history is not the result of the brilliant plans of our leaders. Look at our leaders. And but what's happened is because of the mistakes, what went off the rails, what changed what everyone had in mind is what has really affected everything. And I could give you dozens of examples of things that went wrong that are made things the way they are today. I can give you a few later if you want. And also you can find a couple of hundred in my books. And the nice part about what I do, I've done 300 section books for Berkeley and 8 books for HarperCollins. And I've never run out of material.
No, you never do.
And the good part is I won't do anything within 20 years. So I'm about to include the 90s now.
Nice.
So I write about mistakes and they just keep making them. So it's really great.
I had somebody tell me one time there's no such thing as a failed experiment, because you learn something and you learn whether you do it again or not. So
there is no experiment intrinsically that's a failure, but there are scientists who failed to learn from them.
See, that is much more eloquently put than I just put it. Hence the reason you're the brilliant you are. What is your favorite one of those? What is your favorite mistake somebody made that altered history?
Oh, there are so many. It's really hard to tell. I mean, I would probably say that, well, one that altered modern history was a mistake, was having a bad temper, calling them off. Can I take 2 minutes to tell it, or is that what you're asking me to do?
You can take 40 minutes.
Well, I'll give you a World War II one.
Okay.
And then I'll give you a couple others. But this World War II one is that RAF was losing the Battle of Britain bad. I mean, the general, the marshal who was in charge of Northern England had announced that they had about 3 weeks left.
Oh, wow.
The cabinet. The treasury of Britain was being shipped overseas, and Churchill and the cabinet was getting ready and learning how to speak Canadian. Okay. And they were ready to bug out, and it was that bad. What was happening is the German Luftwaffe was bombing the airfields, the radar, and the fighter factories, and they were winning. They were putting the airfields out of action, and they were killing pilots and the ones who rose against them, etc. And then at night, they could bomb things. Well, there was two Heinkel bombers that their job was to go bomb an airfield in southern France, or southern England, rather. They'd already conquered France. Southern England. They were flying at night because you didn't get shot down as often at night. Flying a Heinkel over against Spitfires, Hurricanes was not a healthy job during the day. So they were on their own flying, and they could not see where they were. Navigation was done by 2 radio signals, and it was 30 miles accurate sometimes. So when you go so long, if you can't drop your bombs, you just dump them out. Why? Because you can fly higher and faster and get out of there quicker. So that's what they did. They looked down, they couldn't see anything, they dropped their bombs. They had drifted over or blacked out London.
Oh.
Now, up until this point, both the Germans and the British and everyone else had honored an unwritten agreement to not bomb the other's population centers. Right. These 2 bombers bombed the east side, killed a couple of dozen people, blew up a bunch of buildings and a few docks. So it looked like it was on purpose. The British were furious. The Germans didn't know. Bombers came back and said, we dumped them over the countryside and came back, sorry. We'll go back tomorrow. Okay? The British are furious. So 3 days later, Churchill organizes about 90 Wellington bombers to go over the North Sea, along the Baltic, and fly in and bomb Berlin. Now, they weren't real good at it yet, to be honest. In fact, the only casualty in it was an elephant in the Berlin Zoo who had a heart attack from the explosions. But it had come just a few days after Goering had gone on the radio and said, if anyone bombed Germany, we are so good, my Luftwaffe is so great, you may call me Meyer, you may call me a Jew. That was a common phrase, he's a Meyer, meant he's a Jew. Okay? Hitler was furious. Goering was furious. The next day, they ordered Golland and everyone else, he had the head of the fighters, to start bombing London and ignore the airfields, ignore the factories, ignore the radar units, just punish them and force them to quit by bombing London, because obviously it's what the British feared if they did it. The pressure went off the RAF. They were able to recover. And Eagle Day, a month later, was a total disaster for the RAF. The tide of battle turned, and we all don't speak German with a lockstep.
Wow.
Because Hitler and Goering lost their temper because 2 bombers went off course and they didn't even know about it.
Yep.
That is amazing.
If that had not happened, there's a very good chance that the invasion of Germany would have worked. Sea Lion would have worked. And World War II would have either ended, or it would have been us and Russia alone fighting them, and it would have been a very long, bloody war.
Wow.
Every chance they would have got the bomb too. So
that is fascinating.
So that's one recent that I thought was an amazing change of history.
Yeah, I remember one I remember is was way back the Roman Empire with where Brutus's positions are like a communication from his commanders is dropped on a field, and one of Octavian's, later Augustus guys finds it and literally knows exactly where his forces are, knows exactly how many they got, where they're positioned. And it's just like, and it was just because some guy changed horses and left it on the old horse. Simple
Oh, yeah.
mistake. Otherwise, the Roman
Not
Empire
wrapped
might
in
still be
three
around.
not wrapped in 3 cigars this time.
Right. Oh yeah, the Three Cigars of Civil War. That's a classic too. Yeah.
It was a blunder that didn't make any difference because the Union was so hesitant. Yes, you can do a number of those. By the way, I'll give you an insight irony into history that isn't necessarily a mistake. But Brutus's mother, when Caesar was young, was having a massive affair with Caesar. She was married to someone else. And Brutus bore an amazing resemblance to Caesar.
Yep.
And was in fact being groomed to be one of his heirs politically. And Caesar always had great affection because he was pretty sure he was the daddy.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of why he was shocked with Et tu, Brutus. And because Caesar picked Octavian over him is also part of why he was a little bitter and joined the rebels.
Yep.
Wow.
Roman Empire's crazy. And was it Rolaids that had a supplement on that?
Pardon?
You guys did a supplement on the Roman Empire, I believe, for D&D way back.
We did some Roman stuff for it, yeah.
I remember that was because we were doing a Roman Empire campaign with that.
Palladium did a whole campaign with it, not us.
Oh, okay. I was getting the two confused.
We did dwells and wizards, dwarves and wizards. We stuck for, reptile people, all sorts of things, but we stuck pretty much within the non-historical context.
That's right. Yeah, Wizards was the supplement I remember the most. That's right. I remember that.
That was fun.
Okay, so
great book.
We talked, we talked like 5 million years ago. So you talked about why you don't drink, bartender. So you worked at with D&D back in the beginning days, back in the day when being a nerd was not nearly apparently as cool as it is right now. Whatever. I think we all have really good nerd cred though, because now everybody's like, I'm a nerd, and they're like, that's so cool. And I'm like, did you get shoved into a locker? Shut up. I have no idea what we went through. But explain how you accidentally fell into writing, because that is so pivotal in your everything you've done. How do you fall into writing or get tricked into it? Was it a double dog dare? That's what I want to know. Was it a double dog?
No. It was to get something else done. I had been the representative to Berkeley back when they hadn't absorbed every other publisher in New York. And I was called Pac-Man Publishing. And they kept buying companies. Working with the ACE people a lot because of what we did. Well, I started dating one of the junior editors. And I was there. I'd come in for Tuesday meetings Friday, and we'd spend the weekend. And I was one of the partners. I could get away with doing it. So knowing I was going to be in and seeing her, but she had some work to get done. Susan Allison, the senior editor at the time in charge of Ace Books, looked at me while I was in meeting her and said, take this book and tell me what you think of it. It was dreck. Badly written cliches. It had been obviously blown out in 3 weeks by somebody, but it had elves in it, so they published it. And I looked at it and went, this is horrible. I write these whole modules and I could do a better job than this. And Sue just looked at me and said, yes, that's what we thought too. Here's a 2-book YA contract. I'll need one in 6 months.
Wow.
That was my first books for them, Sword Quest. And after that, it just sort of happened off and on. And then I started doing anthologies because I was already doing, then I got more into the books because I did licensed products for Mayfair. We did a Dave Drake game, a McCaffrey game, a Joe Haldeman game. We took their top books, I did a Hammer Slammers and a Forever War, Company War with Carol and Jerry, etc. And so I ended up doing some anthologies because they came to me and said, hey, you're doing all this. We need science fiction version of Thieves World. So I created The Fleet.
Oh, wow.
I recruited all my buddies and then they recruited their friends. So suddenly I'm editing books with Paul Anderson in it and Gordy Dixon because Dave Drake knew them. and made me suffer for that, I might add. Well, you're sitting home. Now picture, little young nerdy me, scared to death that someone's going to figure out I'm faking it. Still am, but that's another story. And we're all just faking it. No one's grown up since I believe about 7 BC. And everyone's just been faking it ever since. We're acting like we think we should, but we're still kids inside.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's so true.
It's never changed. And the whole adulthood thing's a myth. Anyhow, and I'm sitting home. In fact, this is after I'm married to Jody. So we're both sitting there. And the phone rings. And we just sent out the invites, and David is saying, take care of you. And I pick up the phone. Now, I've not yet been published. I am total fanboy. And a voice on the other end goes, hi, this is Paul Anderson. I'm in your fleet book. What do you want me to write? And in a burst of absolute brilliant conversation, I said, whatever you want. And he said, I'm going to need a little more guidance than that. So I told him a little of the situation and suggested he do something on the ground involving some recon or something. He said, yeah, I can do that, and got off. And I went, all right, I'm now blooded, right? I'm sure I'm tough now. Okay, right. 2 days later, the phone rings and this voice murfles at me. Hi, this is Gordy Dixon. And
oh my goodness.
I've been hanging around with the Dorsai for years at conventions because we've done stuff with Bob Aspirin for years, right? And I go, Gordy Dixon? And I come to attention out of my chair, and so does Jody.
You just write us another Dragon in the George. We'll be okay.
At least I didn't say whatever you want this time.
Okay.
This is one thing I have to say. So starting and doing this podcast and getting to meet you, getting to meet your amazing wife. She was just such an amazing.
I like her too.
Well, I hope so, because I insist that you keep her around. But
she keeps me around. That's the hard part.
I have to say, the author community, I'm not saying every single one because I'm sure you have stories, but the author community in general is a really interesting celebrity community, because I think a lot of times authors are like, we're getting away with this and they're paying me money to do this kind of thing. Like,
only recently and only a few authors have ever thought they were celebrities.
Yeah.
And I won't even go into who. You all know. But I've never met an author who thought he was important. I've worked with some of the most brilliant people that I admired long into my life. Some of whom are even still alive, amazingly enough, like Bob Silverberg.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I had an opportunity to do some anthologies with him on time travel that were just amazing. And I loved them. And it was great to work with him, established a long friendship. And you don't get more noble in our profession than him, but you'd never know it talking to him or meeting him or just being around him. Remember one day I was taking a guy who was the sales manager for this new company called Wizards of the Coast. They hadn't gotten their product out yet.
Oh, I haven't heard of them yet.
Yeah, to meet some science fiction writers, and he was all fanboy too, and I was like really sophisticated at 5 years in, right? 10 years in maybe, and so he was trailing along, and I said, here, well, I got to talk to this guy. So brought him up, and we had a nice conversation with Bob Silverberg, and then said, well, take care, Bob. And we walked off, and I go, oh, by the way, do you know who that was? And he said, no. I said, that was Bob Silverberg. And, what? And it was great to blow his little mind. I
bet you've had
you
many
never know unless you knew who any of these people were, that they were anything but just another nerd. And of course now, after, I hate to tell you how long I've been at this, but
5 years.
After over 50 years, some of the nerds I hung with are now those people, William Keith used to come into my hobby shop that I founded. And we put his art up on the walls, him and Andy's art up on the walls, because he'd let us display it free, his space art. And he ran his traveler flyers off on our Mimeo machine.
When he comes on, used to hang out at the game
I've
store.
known
I
all
worked
these
at,
people, and now they're like important. And how did this happen?
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And yeah, like you were saying, like the celebrity, the celebrity authors and stuff. I remember Harlan Ellison. Everybody used to give such grief about Harlan, and he came up to me at one point. He's like, "You've been ghostwriting for 3 years now. You are a writer. Stop ghostwriting. Write something on your own." And that was and I'll never forget that. That was my Harlan story. Is he's like, "I've read 3 of your things. You ghostwrite, write. Just take the ghost off." And it was just.
I have seen Harlan angry. I cannot say that I ever had anything but wonderful regard for him, and we were friends. Not close friends, but friends. And I've always admired what he did. And he went out of his way to read and encourage young writers every day of his career.
100%. He was like one of my first reach outs that responded. I was like, "Oh my God, Harlan Ellison!" Yeah, and so I knew he was one that you knew too, and that was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, he was amazing."
He was when he wasn't mad at you, a super good guy.
Yes. As long as you caught his references. If you made a reference, an historical reference that you didn't get, then he would go off for 3 hours. He wasn't mad at you; he was mad at your teachers.
He once said, "Really good, but you blew the end."
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Okay, we have to take a quick break. We're going to take a break, and we will be right back.
Sample locally sourced, quality distilled spirits in the beautiful Columbia River Gorge. At Skunk Brothers Distillery, we're family owned, brewing small batch grain to bottle spirits, just like our grandfather did back in the Prohibition era. From handcrafted bourbons and moonshine to flavored blends and cordials infused with local fruit. Join us for a tasting tour and buy Skunk Brothers spirits straight from the source.
It's all in the family at Skunk Brothers Spirits, located in Stevenson, Washington.
Okay, we're back. We're going to touch on science fiction. I actually just want to follow up one thing, and then let's inappropriately grab science fiction. But what I think is just fascinating talking to you and talking to Jody is like the enviousness of the experiences you guys have gotten to have with the people you've gotten to have, where on some levels it was just a casual, normal relationship. And for those of us that are hearing this, and I'm sure Mark feels the same way, we're like, this would be a time travel swap bodies wish to go experience some of these things that you've experienced, because it's so, you guys are so amazing. Okay, that's a fangirl. I had to do that for a moment.
We were all just people. We were all friends. We played. We gave each other a hard time. We got mad at each other. We accused each other of cheating on the die roll, whatever, on a regular basis. It was just people. And the amazing part is, when I met, did Jody tell you when I met her, I didn't know any of her involvement in gaming?
No,
No,
she left that part out.
She knew I was at Mayfair. She didn't tell me a word about it. She said she knew about it. She was in a D&D group. That's all she ever told me until we were practically engaged. And after I met her, I decided I would take her to Winter Fantasy and impress her with all the important people I knew. Now, the magazine was in a different building, so I never saw her at the other building when she was in. So we get to Winter Fantasy and we walk in, and I'm about to introduce her to Jim Ward and Skip and Kim Mohan and everybody and say, "Hey, look, this is the guy that's that." And Jim Ward comes rushing up, pushes me out of the way and hugs her, going, "Jody, we haven't seen you in forever." And suddenly I realized I had to totally revise my plan for impressing her.
Oh my goodness. I would love to be there for that kind of moment. Let's talk about sci-fi.
You realize the price is getting old. You can have all these moments, and when you're my age, you'll have had them, and people that were your age now will tell you what great moments you had because of the people you interviewed that they only know as legends.
You know what? You say that, and one of my philosophies in life, and I say this to all people, the only thing that I want at the end is so many amazing memories that I can't even think all of them in a week, in a month, in a year. Because when in the end it comes down to it, that's really what you're sitting with more than anything. And so I love this. Like, this is way better than anybody giving me a giant gift or anything like that, is having this interview. I will nerd out about this interview for so long until I show up at Dragon Con in whatever form it is, and I'm gonna be like, "I'm Bill America," and I'm 6 feet tall, so it'll be more like, "Hi, Bill America," but it will.
Well, there nobody will care. I'm just a minion.
No, that is not a correct statement.
A senior minion, but a minion.
There you're a legend. But let's talk about sci-fi.
Okay.
So you talk a lot about fantasy and creating that. So let's talk about it's interesting when you're talking. Actually, I want to go to another subject. Let's talk about your writing. So somebody goes, "Hey, you can write this better. You should do that." When you sat down and started to do that, was it a totally like, did you have to adjust or anything from the modules? Because the modules are stories. You know, we've all played the modules and stuff like that. They're stories, but they're not the same kind of layout.
I have read my stories and my YA books and Chosen Paths and stuff again since and been embarrassed. But I have to say that I've always been a storyteller. I hung with storytellers. Like Bob Astron's wasn't a technically great writer, but was a brilliant storyteller. And I learned reading and following, and I learned from reading. And in those days, only the masters were out there, you know? You couldn't get a grade B book because it had to be enough to sell to make a publisher do it. And there weren't enough of us nerds buying them. So I would say, no, it wasn't really that difficult to sit down and write it because I had an idea in my mind of what they should be. And it was a lot closer and simpler and more linear in those days too in a novel. The sophistication of plotting wasn't yet necessary to make a book popular.
Yep.
Read early Heinlein.
Yes.
And they're what inspired me, and I admired them. But some of those, as young adults, you know, Farnham's Freehold is not a book I will hold dear forever. Anyhow, so no, the writing was not difficult to start in. What was difficult was writing it on my Apple, original Apple.
Yep.
Oh my God.
5 1/4-inch discs, each of which held about 3,000 words.
Yep.
Wow. And it's funny because you think back to the
dot matrix for
dot matrix. I was saying, my first ghostwriting was dot matrix on a Commodore 64. Yes.
Nightmare memories.
Oh God.
No, but I remember opening my Commodore 64 and thinking I was the shit. I remember getting my 906 baud modem and like I was a god amongst. I'm gonna log in. I'm gonna play Mines of Moria. 9600 baud. Look at me.
I think I bought a computer just to play Populous.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Can't go wrong with that.
I don't know which one required it, but only one had it, and I bought it just to play that game.
Peter Molyneux, man. There's a great. So he made all the
later on. I did some, but back then I just couldn't resist.
Oh man.
And a lot of the people who were writing those early things went on to either be real big in that field or become writers. So.
Yeah. What was you said you worked on a game for AOL. What was the role-playing game? Was it Neverwinter or was it something else?
No, it was called Shattered Light, and it got barely released. It was a build your own world game. Yes. And AOL canceled us with in beta. It was done. And we threw it out from another company, and because AOL closed their gaming division.
Yep.
So we took it and Simon & Schuster bought it off us and put it out, and their gaming division failed 6 months later. So it got totally orphaned, but they had the rights and they wouldn't give them back. So we just walked away, having made a lot of money on AOL and a little on them. But they.
Uh-oh.
Oh my goodness.
I opened a Pandora's box. Yes.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. The whole box.
To playing in my favorite franchise of the period, which was a game called Might and Magic.
Yes.
And we did this one.
You did that
Magic, Swords of Zine.
Yes.
Which was basically a follow-up. And I actually know how that ended. I think I can probably even tell now. If you'll remember, you spent the whole time looking for the ancients to help save the world.
Yeah.
And you
Oh my
flipped
gosh.
over to the other side of the world where it was tougher, and you kept looking at everything. Well, the guy doing that and I spent like 2 weeks in a hot tub, basically in California, discussing where it would go and plotting it. And what was going to happen in that would be today a cliche, but would have shocked the gamers then. Excuse me. And that is that when you got to the very end, which never happened because the company went under, West End Game, what was it, Wyatt West something, or New World Games went under, New World Computing. Not because of the computing side, but because he was in the car racing business too, and he had a problem with it and lost all his money, basically. When you got to the very end, which is the one that didn't get done, you're going to go into the temple where you would meet the ancient ones, and you would look up there, and it was you on the wall in giant granite figures, because what it had done is you had been trained to be the ancient ones, and were now ready to take on the bad guys and
Nice.
and be the guardians of the world.
I
And this was
remember.
all derived in a hot tub.
What?
This was all put together in a hot tub.
His office in a hot tub in the evenings every day for
Nice.
about 2 weeks.
Well, I have a question. We're going to go back to sci-fi. Eventually we'll get to sci-fi, but I have a question about the modules that I've always wondered is part of my inspiration for wanting to be a writer and doing that, obviously, or maybe not obviously to me, was playing in Dungeons and Dragons and that whole world and being able to create the characters. And a friend of mine actually literally wrote a 4-part series based on a D&D game we played, where her character got changed into a vampire. She was terrible at it. But how many of the modules were either based around things that had happened or inspired by things that had happened that you then wrote?
I assume you mean happened in a game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, or in real life. If you're
I have
fighting
no idea
orcs
where
in
your
real
mind
life,
is.
that could be a thing.
No, I didn't want to disillusion you. Okay, seriously.
It's
I
all
would
It all
say
starts in a tavern.
Probably a third were based on gaming experiences, including 2 of our most popular campaigns in Roll Aids, which, by the way, was named while drinking too much beer to Michigan. The Roll Aids Game Aids, Roll Aids modules. We woke up and we named it. It was embarrassing. I was accused of thinking of it, but I can't remember. So.
that's awesome.
Anyhow, everyone blamed each other. Most of them were basically designed because of either an interest of the author, the writer, or because we wanted something like this. What can you do? And a lot of it was to make the line balanced. That's a lot of how it works in publishing too. If you submit a book, it can be the best book they've seen in weeks. But if they've already got 6 other similar books they bought, they can't put it in the line because the line will be unbalanced. You've got to get a variety in the modules. You got to get a variety to appeal to people so they feel that things are different. They're not doing it over again or reading it over again.
When you made the modules, do you beta test them? Do you have people play them before you publish them?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We often would drive to a convention and set up a table and run one 3 or 4 times during the convention to just get the general response and make sure there was nothing that confused the players, and then go back and do it before we laid it out and got it ready to print, particularly since we were doing hot wax in those days, and you printed type out on a fancy machine and then put it level on hot wax and then took a picture of the whole page. So a page could take 2 people 3 days to put together. So it was a slow and painful process. So we had to get it right. Changing it meant cutting something out of the hot wax, remelting the wax, and putting a new thing down.
When you came up with this idea to take a very well-known author and an unknown author and merge them together, because I think that's
desperate to make money,
especially at the time when you didn't have. Well, listen, it's cloning. I'm going to get to sci-fi, Mark. I'm going to try to turn.
No, he had the best answer right there.
Left, do what you can.
Yeah, but when you did this, it is revolutionary for that timing period, because now they're self-published. You didn't really self-publish them.
Nobody knew it would work, but Jim Bain was a very brave publisher, and it worked magnificently.
Yeah, before that, it was like it was what I was doing was ghostwriting. Where a big name would say, "Hey, can you? I've got an idea. Flesh this out for me. I don't have time." And that was
From the school of, or
yeah.
created by.
Well,
Yeah.
mine was all Don Pendleton, Executioner, and stuff like that.
Oh, Gold Eagle.
Oh yeah, yep.
So you come up with this. You have the young writers.
500 a book.
Yeah. Hey, it paid my way through college.
I think they still pay that. So scary.
I think it's about the same.
Sorry, go ahead, Eric.
No, no. You guys are going. I'll just.
No, it's fine. We're good. We're good. It's your show.
When you're doing this and you're approaching, the writers, how did that go? Were they energetic and excited about it when you're like, hey, we want to do this partnership?
Generally, yes, because you proposed it to people you knew would be conducive to the idea, that would like it, and we're willing to work with other people. So some people you could, some people you couldn't. It depended on the individual's personality, but the ones who did, almost everyone I talked to was really quite excited about doing it. And another group that was always excited were pairing a creative actor and a writer for Bain Starline, where we had Jimmy Doohan and Steve Sterling, Michael Scott and Armin Shimmerman, which Armin went on after we did the 3 books, merchant books with him, to write first the Rules of Acquisition book, and then 2 more Quark fantasy books, science fiction books that were actually published, and became a writer, and has 6 books to his credit now after he worked with us.
Wow.
Maybe the most fun was Peter Jurassic, who couldn't deliver a straight line. William Keith and I worked with Peter Jurassic. We did one book called Diplomatic Act, and it's about an actor who is kidnapped by aliens because they've seen his show and think he's a brilliant diplomat, and they want him to lead their fleet and their nation. And it's an actor who played one.
It sounds very
familiar.
And
not gonna lie.
And they replace him with an android robot.
Oh, so you even got some Last Starfighter.
Doesn't understand humanity, but can't forget a line and can mimic anything. And so, as a robot, he's a great success. And as a diplomat, he uses theatrical types of things to fool the other side and win. It's a great book.
Cool.
But Peter was absolutely insane to work with. He Londo in Bad 5.
Do you so let's talk a little bit about sci-fi. I'm eventually getting there. I'm going to drag us there. I feel like a little kicking and screaming. So, there are sort of different schools of thought on sci-fi, because there are some really deep, entrenched, very math, science kind of sci-fi. And then there's the suspension of disbelief kind of sci-fi. I'm probably doing this horribly, and he'll be like, why did you make me go on that show? But
Silverberg described as science fantasy many years ago.
Because, you talk to some sci-fi fans, which, I love how fans are different, but sci-fi fans, man, they will call you on your details. It's very hard to call somebody on the details of a fantasy book unless it's part of a world with established rules, right? Because you could be like, butter makes everything taste like milk chocolate, and they can't, how the fuck do they call you out on that? Like, they can't do that. But sci-fi, they will be like, let me explain, if you're trying to explain the propulsion system, why it wouldn't work. So,
oh yeah, you're talking to a person who writes nonfiction history books. Remember,
right?
Any slight mistake, poof, you are deluged. I had a typo. President's name got changed in a book I wrote called Oval Office Oddities, from Madison to Monroe, and I must have gotten 20 letters and a review on Amazon saying, "Don't take a bet. This guy's got one wrong in it." I mean, it's a 125-page book, or 225-page book. There's one mistake on page 11, and that's what got mentioned in the review. And yes, you get that in science fiction too. I'm currently just finished as of tomorrow, because I'm doing one change in it on one scene. Hard military science fiction book set 30 years in the future, using the now abandoned future soldier program, making it work from the military with the exoskeletons and the outfits and everything, and a postulated good battery source. And I had to run it by 3 hardcore 20-year veterans of 3 different branches to make sure I didn't get anything wrong for their technology, their technique, that kind of thing. And I just finished incorporating the last of the changes, which went from including how many grenades you need to clear a 30 by 40 room.
But it's great that you actually reached out to people who know the answer. I think a lot of writers underestimate the importance of research. Even if it's sci-fi or fantasy, if you're talking about some piece that then has to work, you have to talk to people who know what they're talking about.
Actually, my experience is most writers over-research and waste too much time and could be doing a lot more. And I'm talking Weber and Korea and used to be Drake, but not anymore. And Sterling for sure. Will spend much more time researching than I could justify on what comes out of it. But it's a mindset to have everything in place in your head before you can pour it out.
How do you write? Do you plot your books out? How do you write?
3-page summary and then try and see where it ends up. This last one, the beginning and the end are the same as I plotted. The middle has no resemblance whatsoever in any way. As the people and the technology take care. I remember Jody sitting on a couch once, and all of a sudden she's writing along and she goes, they're going to get married. And I went, what? Yeah, this character and this character in my book, they're going to get married in the book. And I didn't even intend it. And I went, wait a minute, you're writing this book. He said, yeah, but it's what's right for the character.
Yep.
If the way I wrote them up, this is where they go. And I went, then it is. And that's what I found, like on this one, someone I thought would be really important isn't, and someone that I threw in at the beginning just as so they could be shot at turned out to be one of the main characters and the point of view characters in the book. And it just evolves that way.
No, I think that's fantastic. As somebody that is on my very best days an outliner, if that's on my very best, I actually have to put something together. Most of the time I'm not an outliner. Like I can envision the beginning and the end, but I don't, like I have to start writing, and then I guess I get brilliant ideas as I'm writing, and I'm like, this is so much better than what I had. I think I would be terrible if I had to stick to an outline.
We're a storyteller writer. And if you take a step back and think about it, and I've pointed this out to other writers, we're the storyteller and we revise because we're also the audience.
Yep.
And so we storytell, and then we go back and say, no, I'm not responding well to that, just as a entertainer. And I've had a few other careers I haven't mentioned. I was a dean of students at a college and have advanced degrees, and I speak on cruise ships about pirates, Roman history, and things like that as well. Nice. In Atlantis, I'm considered an expert.
We're going to unpack that in a minute, my friend.
I get free cruises. Anyhow, you watch your audience and you respond to it. When you're writing, if you think about it, you're your first audience. When you go back and read or change it or think about what you're doing and decide to change it, you're reacting to your audience. You're entertaining yourself by writing it and reacting to how you responding to how you reacted to what you wrote.
No, that makes that's actually very true, because one of my pet peeves as a reader, this has always been a pet peeve of mine, is I don't like it when the author does something that completely pushes me out of the story. Like that's my thing. When I'm like completely like, this isn't, and then I have to keep reading to get back in depth. I'm one of those readers that wants to, like, used to, not anymore because I'm old, but I used to be able to, I'd stay up for days reading the same book. Like I couldn't put the book down. And the first book I did that with was Ender's Game, actually. I remember, like, I could not put Ender's Game down. I still love that book. And I've heard all kinds of reviews, but I was so engrossed in that book and the story that at no point in time, unless I actually passed out because needing sleep, did I put that book down at night.
And I stayed up till new Larry Correa book that I wanted to read, the Black Sword series, which is discusses ethics and attitude and culture a lot. 4 a.m. got yelled at by the wife, picked it up at 3 and put it down at 4 that night. Could not stop. And had to be up at 9 to drive somewhere the next day. So she had words for me, but mostly, boy, were you stupid. I totally understand.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, of course. We do
me
that.
with the Eric Flint books. Any 1632 comes out.
Oh,
I'll be all night with him and David's, David Weber's. I'll be right up with those.
Yeah, well, it's been that way all my life. The weekend of finals my junior year, I was in the anthropology section to look for something, and someone said, "Hey, you like anthropology? You should read this fantasy book by Tolkien."
Oh, that's it.
I finished Monday night without studying anything for the Tuesday anthropology exam, which I only got a B+ on, and because of it, and didn't regret it a bit.
Nope.
So what do you have degrees in? Let's unpackage that little
Degrees. You mean academic training?
Yes, academic training.
Nothing after 1972. So I don't think any of it's relevant.
Well,
History, political science history minor, political science major, history and English minors for an undergrad. I took extra courses. Graduate work in student personnel, which is a combination of counseling and administration. I did not get a doctorate. I didn't finish my doctorate.
So,
The phrase is ABD. It ain't worth it.
Yes.
oh my goodness. What, and you're an expert on Atlantis.
I've just read about it, got fascinated by it. I've been to Santorini several times. I give a talk on it, pointing out that if you combine Santorini and the wave that hit Crete into one event, you've got what was described as happening to Atlantis.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely, totally. Because when Santorini blew, it blew, sunk, killed everybody in the area. It put a 300-foot wave the 70 miles across the Mediterranean, where it hit the Minoan, which was the most advanced culture of its time. They had multi-masted ships, they had air conditioning, they had plumbing, they had sophisticated writing, they had totally equal men and women for all positions. And this wave hit the center of their culture on Crete and pretty much knocked it out, just totally broke it down. Their defense had been their fleet, and their fleet was gone in a flash. And within months, Crete was being raided by Greek barbarians who were in small ships that they practically had to row, but they had a lot of guys with swords, and the Minoan culture basically collapsed. They were known as the Sea Peoples.
Oh, wow.
Things. And if you haven't read about the Minoans, they're fascinating. But if you go to Crete and you go to Santorini and see what happened and read the details, then you go back and read Aristotle, you realize that what he's describing is what happened first on Santorini and then to Crete when it lost in the flood, island submerged. Because a 300-foot wave means everything basically for 5 miles from the shore was washed back into the ocean or smashed. And their entire civilization was basically thrown back into primitive conditions. And then the ash fell and they couldn't raise crops.
Oh, wow.
And they didn't have the ships to get food. So the culture collapsed. And you got to understand where Aristotle says he got it. Aristotle said he got it from the Egyptians, who were telling this story to this yokel from Greece, who was not, Bronze Age Greece was not a sophisticated place. No. This was their great thinker who didn't even know the world was round, which the Egyptian didn't know him for 1,000 years at the point he is asking him about it. He still thought it was flat and on the shoulders of Hercules. Okay, so you get that, and you're talking to him. Of course, they gave him a great story. I mean, you've got this Greek yokel with his jaw down, and you're going to fill it all in and take all the things you can and shove it in, just like a New Yorker will do to anyone visiting their city. So that's where we get Atlantis, but it's based on it. So if you want to visit Atlantis, look at the crater at Santorini, then go look at what's left of the city of Knossos and stuff, which did survive, but most of their culture and their trade and everything died on Crete. And you've pretty much got a perfectly definable background of it to explain where the story came from.
Wow. What made you decide? I know from what you've said, you like history, love history, possibly. I'm saying the wrong words. This is what happens when more than half a bottle of wine's in me. What made you decide to start writing about it, writing about the eras in history and stuff? What made you kind of go that route from, you'd been writing a lot of fantasy and stuff like that. What made you go, I'm going to write about all the idiots in history?
Always loved history. Was going to read about it anyhow. And I got married and had to make some money. So I decided to monetize my interest.
Yep.
And because I'm not a very reverent person, I wrote these tongue-in-cheek, sort of historically accurate, but not very reverent books, all about mistakes all through history, because no one else had.
Have you been approached by the guy from Have you done a drunk history?
He doesn't drink.
No.
Can't do it.
No.
You know what?
I've done.
Mark, shut your face right now.
When the books were coming out, they'd set me up for 15 or 20 radio interviews.
Yep.
I mean, which are less embarrassing than when I did Making Contact, what to do if a UFO lands in your backyard, which got me some really wonky interviews and appearances.
You're talking to my people now. I was on Coast to Coast AM and all that with my Erie, Florida books and everything.
Yeah, and I'm going, never again. When the gal wanted us to get together at the end of my talk at the Barnes and Noble so we could reach out telepathically to the aliens behind the moon, I got out of there and canceled my next two.
Those are my peeps, man.
That was an intellectual exercise to me, and I also lived in Evanston by the Institute.
Nice.
So I could tap all the material.
Nice. Yeah, that's my group. I'm big with the tinfoil hat crowd.
The trick is to take what you like and find a way to make money on it by writing about it.
Mine's all folklore and history, so that's where I'd been into the folklore aspects, and so
exactly.
100%.
And then you also get to deduct all the books and all the games relating to it.
Yes.
But I
My
know
library.
that when I was younger.
You wouldn't believe my library.
Yeah. I can only imagine you and Jody have got quite the collection. So.
Yeah, the movers hated us.
Let's talk about fans for a moment. So you went with the tinfoil hat crowd, which are Mark's like people.
And some very serious scientists who are interested in the topic too, and some very intelligent people.
Yeah, exactly. And there's like I said, I talk about them, but they are some are brilliant and really amazing stories that I get.
Yeah,
and,
I even know some on the show that aren't that dumb. They just know what they're doing. Dave Childers told me at a Gen Con 25 years ago, I'm going to be writing some weird stuff. Don't hold it against me. It pays.
Yep.
And now he's on Ancient Aliens, one of the creators.
Fans. Your fans specifically.
I don't have fans. I'm not that famous. Jody has fans. I don't have fans.
Oh.
That not possibly be accurate.
Absolutely.
I can't fangirl and you tell me you don't have fans.
I haven't put a science fiction book out in almost 20 years, close to 25. I'm just approaching 2. I'm doing that, and I'm co-authoring a mystery novel called Ghost Town.
Who are you co-authoring it with?
A gal named Karen Herkey is a very talented indie author.
And
it's a great premise. We're having a ton of fun with it because it got my history involved again. You're in a town, small town, Gridley, Illinois, a river town on the Illinois River. And they're thinking of putting the next airport that's near from Chicago. And there's a murder. And the sheriff has to investigate it. And she's come back to the town where her family was from because of a bad experience as a Chicago cop. So she's back in town, chief investigating this murder. And she hears a voice. And what's happened is there is another town sort of superimposed over the town where those who don't totally pass on stay as ghosts. Most stay in a location, but her great-great-grandfather was the mayor of the town.
Oh,
And so he
wow.
gets to travel the whole town, and he's been overseeing the couple of hundred ghosts that have remained, most just passed through, and been there. And he pretty much given up on his family, his descendants, which are the only ones that could see him, until she came back and she was actually interesting. So they get together and solve the murder, basically.
Nice.
So it's sort of a Cosmo Topper meets Perry Mason kind of detective thing.
Love it.
And he gets to make comments from a 200-year-old perspective, basically. He's just post-Civil War, and she's a modern woman.
Oh,
Fantastic.
wow.
And so they get to interact, and he gets to observe things, and he talks about bare knuckle politics, and he means bare knuckle politics. And she gets to complain about chauvinism, and he keeps thinking, you have no idea.
What is the name of this book? When is it coming out?
Neither of them are sold yet.
Oh,
We're writing them
okay.
both on spec. I'm writing Never Again, which is the armored book, and I'll probably deliver it to Baines sometime in the near future and see if they want it first. If not, I'll put it out from Prince of Cats or one of the good, or Wordfire or one of the good small presses.
Yep.
And Ghost Town will take to a major thing. It's called Ghost Town, and we have a lot of fun of it. By the way, his girlfriend's still in town too. That we have ghost love scenes.
Nice.
Now there's a whole.
Now it's
200
Erica's
years
field
are still
there.
together.
Now I was gonna say now it's my kind of book right there.
Yeah, it's a cozy. Nobody dies on scene. Nobody does it on scene.
Yep.
Fade to black. Appear again.
I will still be interested. Just saying it can go up a notch in my mind. It's okay.
Okay.
That's what books are for. Is
That's what
imagine.
the cozy books are for. That's what the cozy books are for.
Yes,
Implied.
absolutely. To insinuate but not show.
So have you had gaming fans?
There are people who like what I've done, but you know, I'm just a minor player who walked around with the big players. I'm not a big player myself. I've done, you know, games like my Empire Builder Railroad series was very popular and still is. And there's card games I contributed to, and there's other ideas I had that have come out as games and have done well. But my time was, the kids who tend to be fans don't even remember my games came out.
Yeah. That's
They
my
weren't
ghost
born
writing.
yet.
Yeah, my ghostwriting stuff was for Pacesetter, which you guys reprinted as it went with Mayfair with Chill, and
Yep.
and it's like
Well,
nobody remembers the
I have
Pacesetter
people
stuff,
come
but
up
they remember the Mayfair.
and talk with me all that, but most of my fans are writers I've worked with,
Yeah.
who I've written checks to,
Yes.
which makes me dubiously but really popular sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to get popular. Well, let's talk a little bit before this one's over and I go into my rapid fire questions that don't go very rapid fire for long. But what got you involved with Dragon Con? Because
I have a bad habit of organizing the room. Yep. Do you ever get a sheepdog and have a party and it tries to herd everybody into one room?
yes,
Well, before I was in science fiction or before I was any of this, I had a career in the training industry. Well, after I was a professor and a dean, I discovered how lousy it paid back in the 60s and 70s, back in the 70s in particular. So I had a training marriage before Jody, and
Love one.
and when we got married, I had to make more money. So I got a job as a training instructor, which included running very quickly evolved into my running all the events for a couple of major insurance companies when I was in their trading department, Employers of Wausau and then Baker's Life. And it meant I ran events, 500 salesmen and speakers and dinners and which ones you allowed special services from the hotel and whatever. I had to handle all of that stuff and catering. And so when I started going to cons, which I did after that, as I got into the D&D more, and during that for a while, I began pointing out things that could be done or helping with something, and very often ended up sort of organizing something. And I was helping with a bunch of stuff and doing some stuff. And for some reason, evidently, I don't intimidate well. And the person running Dragon Con at the time came in and said, I need somebody to help and keep track of and keep in line Dino De Laurentiis.
Oh my.
Oh,
June had just come out. So he said, can you do that for me this show? And I said, sure, I'm just a guest. I paid for the badge. He says, I'll take care of it. Just do it. So I did. And the next year it was Alice Cooper.
Nice.
oh,
And so I got involved with that aspect of it. And that got me to know the other people on staff. And eventually I evolved away from that person to working with some of the other people. And they began asking me to help with the sort of do that. And now we're into the 90s and Dragon Con's starting to grow. And we're into this. And Jody's with me now, of course. And we're doing panels, and then we're helping to run panels. Then we're helping to organize panels. And then when Pat Henry took over many years ago in the middle of the last scandal, he said, Bill, I want you to come on board as a senior director senior advisor. I'm the only senior advisor on the staff. I'm not really a director. I just carry a director badge. And I basically take care of anything they want, including, like they said, all right, create something that'll work for the Dragon Awards. So I did. So
wow.
I organized the Dragon Awards, which I will plug profusely because there are People's Choice Award, Dragon Awards, and look for them on the net, and it's open to anyone to vote and nominate whatever you want. And we've gotten an amazing mix of books and people nominated, from Mary Cowell to Larry Correa. So it's open to anybody, and we're getting literally thousands and thousands of votes, 5 figures of votes. So it's a people's award, and I'm very proud of how it's working out. Although last year's been a bit of a strain, our numbers were down. Something to do with nobody coming to the con.
Yeah, that's understandable. I think.
Which, by the way, we are planning live this time, but we don't know what restraints we'll be under. And if you haven't signed up, you should, because if we have to cap it, we'll stop selling attendance.
Yeah, no, I think both of us put a little thing in to try to come on as guests, and we'll see.
It's a bad year for that, because we don't know how many people we're going to get. So we're not taking a lot of new people that weren't in last year, because we owe it to them.
Exactly.
But
So
don't worry, I badge every year because I love Dragon Con. I love the atmosphere. It's
your
just
podcast numbers are sufficient. Put in with our media department to get a media badge. It's easier than getting a pro badge.
There you go.
Mark, co-host, let's go get media badges.
We'll
Done.
Little
tricks of the trade.
I do this podcast. I have this many viewers, this kind of viewership. This is where I appear.
No, I'll absolutely do that. Okay.
Doing this on something that's going to get shown. I'm giving everybody advice on how to bypass my system. It only works if you have an incredibly popular podcast, I'll point out.
It only works if Jody Lynn Nye orders her husband to go on the podcast. That's how popular that podcast is.
I don't think anyone's going to listen to me anyhow, so I'm safe.
Well, we'll see.
That is not an accurate statement at all. I'll just tell you.
I think you'll be surprised.
I'm absolutely filled with false humility.
But again, to your point, that I think that a lot of not every author, you've encountered them, but I think that it's a very humble group that is so excited just to be around other people.
No, it's a publicly humble group about public appearances. An egotistical and intellectually non-humble group about having the nerve to write something you think someone else will read. But our courage is in different directions.
Love it.
It's not built in our appearance strength. It's built in our mind and what we can produce.
Fantastic.
That is sheer brilliance, and I am going to end on that note because that was brilliant. Bill, if somebody wanted to cyber stalk you, where is the best place to do that?
It's almost impossible. I don't have a Facebook that you can find. I don't do any other of the major media. I've got, I took my website, mistakesInHistory.com, down to be revised, and I'm not sure it's even up there still. So if you want to cyber stalk me, attend Dragon Con.
That is brilliant advice, and I love that.
Or Liberty Con if you can get in.
I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for being on this podcast with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to make 1,000 inane statements and try and sound like I know what I'm doing.
You sound way more like you know what that you're doing than I do. So
That Inca
I'm
Cola.
just better at making it sound that way. I've had more practice.
that's very true. You have been brilliant. Okay, this has been Drinking with Authors. I've been Erica Lance.
I've been Mark Muncy.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you both.